I was bragging about, first of all, reading your book, because it's a sizable feat, right? So I was bragging about it, and I was like, yeah, it's one of those ones. You need to kind of check that out. And one of the things I said that you did really, really well, I think is very important, not just for someone like King, but I mean anyone that's lived like a huge life is like connecting with their humanity, and the humanness of the person, right? What gravity do you place on humanity in your work in general, like in your work, in your day-to-day life, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that because for this book in particular, I felt like we lost sight of King's humanity.
Yeah,
That's probably the
yeah,
number one thing that motivated me to write this book. When you turn somebody into a national holiday and a monument and a 30-foot tall statue at 1,000 streets,
yeah,
you
yeah,
forget that he had feelings,
yeah.
that he had doubts, that he had moments where he wasn't sure what to do next. That this is a guy who attempted suicide twice as a teenager, right? We need to connect with that real person again, or else what's the point? What's the point of asking me to spend, you know, hours and hours reading this book? I think the audiobook is like 24 hours or something like that. Yeah. And Dion Graham just kills it. It's
Yeah,
but
yeah,
if I'm going to ask you to spend that much time, you've got to really feel like you know this person, that you're getting to know him as a person. So I open the book by saying, early on in one of the first pages, I say, he's not a saint, he's not a symbol, he's a man who chewed his fingernails, who shouted at the TV during game shows, and who, yes, cheated on his wife. Let's be real. Let's get to know him as a person with flesh and blood, because I think you know we can't really be inspired by him if we keep treating him like a statue.
absolutely, absolutely. Now, realizing the kind of time we're in, we mentioned, he who might should not be named, down there in Florida. It's just all over the world, right? This is a really polarizing time. What do you believe is the future of politically and socially engaged literature in an increasingly polarized world?
Well, I think the literature becomes more and more important.
Hmm.
It's our expression of our deepest feelings. It's expression of who we are as a people. And I believe that no politician can stop empathy. No politician can stop curiosity. No politician can subvert history. We all have a responsibility to fight for it, but those who are attempting to squash it will fail.
Yeah, yeah, powerful, powerful. What practical strap? Well, let me ask you this before I even get into this, because I think this is something that you have to have when you have like a career as long as yours, and when you tackle such things. What does resilience mean to you?
Well, resilience means like taking on a book that you don't think you can really write,
Yeah, yeah.
that is going to take 5 or 6 years, and that you're going to be all alone for 5 or 6 years working on this and not giving up, not losing faith. There are many, many moments where I feel like I can't do this. This is too big. No, nobody can ever write a book all by themselves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And here I am just plugging away. And I think that you've got to believe in yourself, and more importantly, like, you have to believe in the story. You have to believe that this story matters. And I may not get it 100% right. I may have failures. There may be things that, times where I get knocked down, but you just have to keep going in the same way that King kept going, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
that nobody's perfect, but you have to just try to do the best you can. So, um, resilience to me is just, discipline. Keep keep coming back when you get knocked down.
Yeah, yeah. So are there any strategies? This is where I kind of wanted to go, right? But I just started thinking about it. And I was like, let's define it first. So are there any strategies to maintaining that discipline specifically, especially when you don't have a story to hold on to? What strategies would you like offer out there to listeners, readers, people that are taking things in visually? What strategies would you offer? And what strategies have you kind of learned yourself?
Well, I think about, how like Ali adapted over the course of his career as his skills changed, as his opponents changed, right? Like learning to play defense, learning to, take punches. I think, for readers, for writers, the main thing is to try to learn from the people around you who've written before. Don't forget about your elders. Don't forget about the stories that have been written long before ours. We have a tendency, especially among young people, and I'm guilty of this when I was starting out, to think that like those books that came before couldn't be any good.
Mhm.
But there's gold in those books,
Yeah,
and there's so much to learn from the people who wrote these stories before. Like, Lerone Bennett wrote one of the first books on Martin Luther King, and it's long out of print, but it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Lawrence Dunbar Reddick wrote a book about King in the 50s when he was still in Montgomery, and it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And those books are out of print mostly, but we've got to go back and look. And so I think when you have doubts, do more reading,
Yeah.
and remember that those writers probably had doubts about themselves too.
Absolutely. I was just thinking about, you mentioned Dick Gregory, right? And I was just thinking, as you've been naming all these different folks, what are some intangible like gifts that they like nuggets of like insider thought that they gave you? Not necessarily about King, but just about like the time and the music or anything, the American culture. What are some of those intangible nuggets that you ended up getting that you just were not sure or didn't have any aspirations of getting when you got a chance to talk with some of these amazing people?
Yeah, and there's always the little things. It was the things that you don't even think about asking, and just realizing that you were in the presence of people who knew King and knew him well and just hung out with.
Yeah.
So Harry Belafonte told me about how they would take off their shoes and socks and sit on the rug and listen to records.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'd ever read that before. And I asked him, how did King sing? Was he a good singer? And he just laughed and said, no, he was a loud singer. Or June Dobbs Butts, who was King's childhood friend, grew up on Auburn Avenue with him and would go home with him after school. And she remembered that they would have white bread with butter and sugar sprinkled on top as a snack. They got home from school. That King's housekeeper.
Yeah.
Just the fact that he had a housekeeper tells you a lot about his childhood.
Yeah.
Right? So these little details. And I just feel like, they were all just little kisses, like from these, some of the people passed away before the book even got done.
Yeah.
So the chance to share these little gems with people who really knew King well, and then also to realize and to appreciate that, I was probably going to be the last person to interview him at many years.
Yeah.
So it was just, one of the great gifts.
Yeah. And I'm glad you told me something from Harry Belafonte. That was literally who I had in my mind. But I was like, structuring and reframing that question. When you see, speaking of reframing, right? Like have you seen the MLK X was a docudrama right now? How does looking at something that you worked on so long in a different angle, at a different medium, kind of, what is that experience like first? I probably got another question there, but what is that experience like? Because I imagine like we've been talking about anime, we've been talking about all kinds of crazy cool stuff in these conversations. And like there's a certain level of like not even ownership, but like now in the cultural zeitgeist, to be a fan is like a certain badge of honor, right? And to have like a certain level of knowledge, like compiled on a topic, is a certain badge of honor, right? And pride. So when you're watching something like that, what is that experience like for you?
And you hit it right on the head, because sometimes I felt like watching it when I watched it. Hey, wait, that's my story.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm the one who said that he attempted suicide twice. You can't use that. But what it reminds me of is that it's our story, and everybody gets to tell it in their own way. And the more people who tell it, the better. There's a young woman working on a play based on my birth control pill book right now, and she's taking it off in her own crazy direction, which is beautiful. So it's a really good reminder that I'm just, one of the people sharing this story in my book. I hope will be helpful to others who come along afterwards. And the TV show is a great example of that.
Yeah. We've all been watching it together, me and some of my friends. And I was just thinking about your book. It's like the most recent thing I read. And like I said, it's really good. You did a really great job. And I was just thinking I just read a book called Monsters, The Fan's Dilemma by Claire Dieter. And when they were talking about what fandom has kind of evolved into, made me think about your work, and made me think about Nana Kwame Adjabrenya's work, Chang'an also. And just, like I said, it is a level of ownership, but also more so like, I have done this work and spent this time with this subject, and you're going to really, it's like a testament to the work and the creative art of who we're watching, right? Because you're going to be able to kind of see some things that other people aren't going to necessarily see. So yeah, and specifically, like you said, the suicide attempt, that when I watched it, I was like, I'd seen it there. What kind of joy when you're uncovering things like that you hadn't seen? But because as I was talking about your book earlier, I was like, there are things there that I didn't see, and when I went to the book, I was like, oh, another King book, right? And to get those things in there, that was transformative, right? Like I've been suggesting it. When you're uncovering those like nuggets, I would imagine there's a level of like pride in both like your literary detective work, right? But then also pride like I got something.
Yeah,
It'll take us back.
and I got something, and it's going to change the world's view of maybe the most important American who ever lived, right?
Yeah.
One of them, and certainly my favorite American. Period. I little me, little John I from like suburban New York, same town as Nana Kwame, by the way. We grew up in the same school district. I'm older than him, but
Yeah.
I'm going to like change what we know and understand about Martin Luther King. What an unbelievable honor that is, right? So to find Daddy King's unpublished autobiography, I'm the first person
Yeah.
to set eyes on that since the man who typed it. To find proof that Playboy made up King's quote about Malcolm X. These are game-changing pieces of history that we will now understand King better because I found these nuggets of gold.
Yeah.
And I get goosebumps just thinking about it, like how
Yeah.
good that feels. Not because I got the scoop, because I got it, but because I'm able to share it. Like King said, about powerful words, that they're like his grandma's cookies, and the joy is in sharing them as much as eating them, right?
Yeah,
Like I get to share this new information that we had it all wrong. We were living a lie when we thought about what King said about Malcolm X. He did not say that he considered Malcolm X's fiery demagogic oratory a source of nothing but grief for Black Americans. That quote was made up by Playboy magazine, and King actually said, hey, I don't think I have all the answers. Malcolm and I are both interested in Black dignity, right?
Yeah.
That's big.
That's big. That's powerful. I was thinking too, when we were talking earlier about the power of literature and nonfiction, but fiction and nonfiction, right? And I was thinking about the world that like works like this exists in a lot of times, where it's like really highbrow and scholarly, right? How do you toe that line, like making it palatable for your everyday reader while also doing that scholarly level work? How do you toe that line? What does it mean for a book like this to come outside of, say, college classrooms and get in the hands of high school students and or your neighborhood garbage man?